Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, if somebody tells you a book is a must-read book, they're wrong. So the other day, as I do every so often, I was trying to come up with a list of ideas for videos. So videos I can make in the future for the channel. And I thought maybe I should do a must-read books video. It's the sort of thing that, works well with the algorithm. It would probably do pretty well in terms of views and things like that. And I've never done a must-read books video. So I thought maybe I should do that. So I started trying to think of what books I would put on that list. And the first book I thought of was a book called The Dictator's Handbook. This is a non-fiction book, a politics book. I have mentioned it, I think, on the channel before. It's about like power structures in governments and corporations and things like that. It's a really, really fascinating book. And it's a book that I reflect on pretty much whenever I watch the news, whenever I watch how politicians are kind of manoeuvring themselves on the news. I reflect on that book. It taught me a lot. But then I thought to myself, is this really a must-read book? Is everybody else going to get the same out of it that I got out of it? And I decided the answer was almost certainly no. I read that book at the right time in my life for the ideas in the book to really sink in and stick with me, but I wouldn't call it a must-read book. So then I tried to think of some other must-read books, and I couldn't think of any. I can think of hundreds of books that I've absolutely loved, books that I adore, books that I would love to read again, books that I would recommend to people whose tastes I know. But I firmly don't believe there is any such thing as a must-read book. I think the problem with saying that a book is a must-read book is that it's a bit gatekeepery. You're almost saying if you don't read this book, you are not a true reader or you're not a true horror fan. If you're saying a book is a must-read horror book and someone who's a horror fan doesn't read it, then are they a true horror fan? Similarly, someone might try the book and not like it, and then they might think to themselves, well, what am I missing? Why am I not getting this must-read book? When in fact the truth of the matter is there are no must-read books. Every book will land differently with every reader, and books that are tremendously meaningful and important for some people will be like nothing burgers for others. They just won't, they won't impact on other people at all. And I think the even bigger danger is if people think they are not enjoying the books they should enjoy, if they think they are not getting the books that you are supposed to get and fall in love with, that it will turn them off reading completely. I think there's a real risk, and I think this is something that happens again and again in schools, is that people are forced to read certain books to meet the curriculum, and those books end up turning them off reading. I'm someone who's always read a wide variety of stuff, and a wide variety of stuff that was really easy and accessible and enjoyable to me as an individual. I think if you had a diet that was only must-read books, you'd very quickly get very bored indeed and probably get turned off reading. I looked on Goodreads in preparation for this video at a must-read books list on Goodreads, and one of the books on there was The Little Prince, which actually I've read quite recently, and I know that that's a book that loads of people really, really love. And I can see why, but it's a book that didn't land with me at all. Another book that was on that list is Pride and Prejudice. Now, Pride and Prejudice is a book I tried to read a couple of years ago, and I DNF'd it. I just couldn't get on with it at all. So does the fact that I haven't read Pride and Prejudice mean that I am not a true reader? Does it make my experience of literature meaningfully worse than someone else's? No, it doesn't. It just means that I haven't read Pride and Prejudice. That's all it means. And the other problem with making must-read lists of books is that you end up just regurgitating the same books again and again, like, dare I say it, Pride and Prejudice. People tend to put in those book lists books that they consider to be important, and they consider them to be important because they've been told in the past that they're important, and they don't want to feel like they are straying too far away from the literary establishment. They don't necessarily, and they may love these books, they may have really enjoyed Pride and Prejudice, for example, but they wouldn't necessarily put a book on that must-read book list that they felt was a bit risky, that wasn't a book that got wider praise from people. I think the danger therefore is you just end up with the same things again and again and again, and we don't move the conversation forward. We just end up talking about the same classic books. Willow from Willow Talks Books made a really good video recently about the question of, are there too many books? And Steve Donoghue did a really good kind of response video to Willow's video. And the question Steve was tossing around in his video was, if there are too many books, and I think there's a lot of evidence that there are too many books, hundreds of thousands of books are published every year, far more than the market can sustain. But the question then becomes, who decides which books don't get published? Who's going to be the person who goes through the list of books that are going to be published with a red pen and goes, no, we're not going to publish that one? And it's an impossible question, because as Steve says in his video, any one of those books could well, and probably will, land with a reader, a particular reader, may only be one person, but will land with them in a really meaningful way and will be an important book that they carry with them for the rest of their lives. And it may be a book that other people will consider to be absolute rubbish, but that's the point, isn't it? Everybody reacts differently to every book. I thought that was a really interesting point from Steve. I'll leave a link to both his and Willow's videos in the description to the video so you can watch them for yourselves. But it occurs to me that the same problem exists for must-read books. Just as nobody should be given the job of deciding which books aren't published, I'm not sure anybody should take on the job of telling other people which books they must read, because really it's all a nonsense. I think a far more useful thing to do is just to talk about your personal reaction to books with, the people who you interact with about books. That's what I try and do on the channel. I try and not get too kind of wrapped up in hyperbole, and I just talk about my reactions to particular books. And hopefully, some of those reactions will be things that appeal to people out there, and I'll think, yeah, that sounds like the kind of book I would enjoy, and they'll pick it up, and hopefully they will enjoy it. What I try, as I've said, not to do is tell people that there are certain books that they have to read, because I just don't believe that that's true. So I hope you found that interesting today. Maybe you think I'm talking complete nonsense and that there are books that everybody should read, but I really don't think that's true. Do let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.